Good evening and welcome to Midweek. Coming up on tonight's show, pregnant and smoking, just how much damage you're doing to your child, and the women who smoke believing a smaller baby will make for a less painful delivery. Ahead of a TV3 special next Monday, we're looking at Scientology in this country and the cults that appear to be cashing in and ripping families apart. And Gay Byrne joins us to talk about the presidential race and his latest road safety programme. Very welcome back. Well, do you know anything about cults in Ireland? Well, we do have some, despite what you might think, and in some instances they're ripping families apart. Well, the Midweek team has put together a documentary called Ireland's Secret Cults, which is on next Monday here on TV3. And Michael and Ciara, who made that documentary, are with me now. Michael, the House of Prayer and Christina Gallagher, we talked about it here in Midweek last season. Just remind our viewers who she is and what the House of Prayer is.
Christina Gallagher basically is she says she's a holy visionary who gets messages from Our Lady and from Jesus. She says that they talk about sort of pretty much the end of the world, doom and destruction. It's all about fear, all of that kind of stuff. She opened up the House of Prayer, which is on Achill Island off the Mayo coast, back in 1993. So she's been at this for almost 20 years at this stage. And, you know, during that time she has amassed, well, no one knows quite how much she's amassed, but she's amassed a lot of money during that time. People giving her donations. A lot of times she doesn't actually say what the donations are for. People will give her money. She says that she's raising money for secret causes and things like that. And I suppose there's been a lot of controversy about her recently because for, I suppose, the last few years, but they've discovered properties that have been linked to her, very fancy properties that have been linked to her here in Dublin, you know, places where you'd see pop stars living basically, and indeed some of her neighbours are pop stars, and also in the UK. All
right, let's take a clip then about the property in the UK where, Michael, you went along with Jim Gallagher, who wrote the book about Christina Gallagher and the House of Prayer. Take a look at this.
It's called Lower Hall and was bought with cash for £1.8 million sterling in 2009. It's now on the market for a cool £2.25 million and is in Christina's son's name.
Well, it's an amazing house. You can actually watch it on the estate agent's website. It's set in 5 acres. It's 11,500 square foot in the house. It has its own lake. It has an indoor swimming pool. It has 7 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms, a hot tub for 7 people. There's a gym. There's a steam room. There's a snooker room. You know, the kitchen is laid out in Italian marble. She always claims to her followers that material wealth means nothing to her and she would happily live in a tent. Well, obviously, when you see a place like this and the home she also owns in Ireland, that's utter nonsense.
1.8 in cash, Michael.
It's not bad, is it, Colette?
Yeah, and she's properties in Malahide, is it?
She's a property in Malahide, in the same estate as Ronan Keating's house is, and some of the lads from Westlife. It's the second biggest house in the estate out there, and I mean it's plush. Let me tell you, it's plush.
You did try and talk to her. You wanted to do an interview with her.
Yeah, we tried. We've been to the house in Malahide. We've been to the house, obviously, in the UK. We've been down to the House of Prayer in Achill when there's definitely been people there, and they wouldn't open the door to us, basically. I could see them inside peering out through the door at me, but they wouldn't come out to us. All
right, what's the latest scheme, this €250 thing?
Yeah, she's selling a picture, basically. It's a framed picture of Our Lady for €250. Now, we spoke to an ex-member of the House of Prayer in the documentary, and she said that she went into the shop down there, and this is when she started to see the light, basically. She went into the shop, and she said to the people in the gift shop down there, she said, you know, what if I buy the postcard, because that's pretty much, that's the same picture as is in the frame. And they said, no, you have to buy the one in the frame for €250, or Our Lady isn't going to be able to protect you from the impending disasters.
All right, OK. The Palmarians, Ciara, who are the Palmarians?
Yeah, it's probably a cult that you've never heard of before. Certainly I'd never heard in comparison to something like the House of Prayer. They started over in Spain. There was a guy called Clementes who claimed that he was getting visions from Jesus, and he was an accountant, and he started this religion way back 30 or 40 years ago. But they heard about it in Ireland, Catholics over here heard about it, and they started a branch in Ireland, and it's actually one of the most successful branches outside of the Spanish headquarters.
And what are the rules? What do you have to abide by to be in the Palmarians?
Yeah, well, I suppose unlike the House of Prayer, this is the most startling thing about this particular cult, is that they have very serious rules that if you don't adhere to, you're excommunicated, and they really control their members' lives. So simple things like what they wear, you have to be covered from basically your neck down to the floor. You have to wear skirts kind of 4 finger lengths below the knees. Men have to wear long sleeve shirts. You're not allowed to roll them up unless you're washing the dishes. You're not allowed to read books, magazines, watch television, look at a computer. You're not actually allowed to speak to any other person who isn't a Palmarian. So the most frightening thing about Palmarians is that it really is separating families, because if you have a family member who doesn't follow the Palmarians and you do, you're not allowed to speak to them.
You're completely cut off. You spoke to someone in that situation. Let's take a look at this clip.
Clemente claimed visions, prophecies, and, within a short period of time, declared himself Pope of his own religion, the Carmelites of the Holy Face, otherwise known as the Palmers, or Palmarians. Many Catholics living in the area fell for his every word. On one occasion, he claimed to lose 15 litres of blood, his own version of the stigmata.
Ciara, you spoke to a former member of the Palmarians whose mother is still actually in the group.
Yeah, I spoke to a lovely young girl in her 20s. We'll call her Beth. She wanted to remain anonymous. Herself and her siblings were born into the Palmarians. Her parents were both Palmarians, but the father left because he became suspicious about how they were operating. The mother pretty much left the house one day, left a note saying that she couldn't be part of their family anymore. That was 6 years ago, and neither she nor any of her siblings, nor her aunts nor uncles or any of the family have heard or seen or spoken to their mother since. She, as far as they believe, she lives over in this basilica in Spain, and we actually went over to visit the basilica in Spain, which is the headquarters. That's where they believe their mother is, but they really don't know.
She would deny ever knowing them if they met.
Yeah, she spoke about an incident where her father, soon after the mother left, met the mother in the centre, and the mother was reaching up to try and get something from a shelf, and she couldn't reach it, so the father went over to help her, and he said, "Why won't you look at me? Why won't you speak to me?" And she said, "Because I simply don't know who you are, and if you don't leave me alone, I'm going to have to call the police." And this was a woman that he'd been married to for 20 years.
Quite incredible. Michael, the idea of credibility and how so many people would be involved in different organisations. There is a priest who is sort of backing Christina Gallagher.
Yeah, Father McGinnity. He's basically he's actually her spiritual director. I mean, it says this on her website. So he sort of interprets the visions that she gets, or that she says she gets, off Our Lady and off Jesus. And yeah, a lot of people that we spoke to said that, you know, if it wasn't for him, the House of Prayer wouldn't have the credibility that it probably enjoys today, because a lot of people feel that, you know, why would a priest be involved with something that wasn't above board?
Wasn't the real thing. You look at Scientology as well, Ciara. How many Scientologists do we have in the country?
Scientologists would say there's somewhere between 200 and 500. Those opponents would say it's more like 120. But yeah, we spoke to ex-members who, some had dedicated up to, I think, 20 years, one member said, of his life to Scientology. They would have spent a lot of money on courses, which the Scientologists would say, you know, would help them, would better them. They also were asked to disconnect, to cut communication with family members who didn't support Scientology.
What is auditing?
Auditing, it's basically the idea in Scientology is that we've all been through traumatic experiences in our past, and if we can relive and release those traumatic experiences, we can move on. So auditing is a system whereby you learn to relive your past traumas and be freed of them.
You spoke as well to former Scientologists, ex-Scientologists in the documentary.
Absolutely, and they would say that the real thing that Scientologists look for, they look for vulnerable people. That's the claim that they made, that they look for people who have a ruin, as Scientologists call it. They have something about them that they want to change, or they want to be helped. You know, this idea of picking on the vulnerable. And certainly the ex-Scientologists that I spoke to would say we were at a point in our lives, you know, one girl, her father had a drinking problem, another person, their mother had just passed away. They were at a point in their life where they needed something, and they really felt that Scientologists zoned in on that and said, we can help you, we have a course that will fix you, and if you sign up to it, you will be a better person. And once they get you in, it's really about kind of teaching you that Scientology is the only way that you can leave, or you can always leave, but if you do, your life will fall apart.
But again, notoriously secretive, very hard to interview people who are Scientologists.
Absolutely, like them and the Palmarians and the House of Prayer, I have been looking, seeking, asking for interviews with the leaders, but they say they've nothing to hide, but they won't speak.
All right, Michael Keir, thanks very much for coming in to tell us about Ireland's secret cults. It's going to be broadcast here on Monday, here on TV3 at 9 o'clock. Now, coming up after the break, Gay Byrne will be here talking about his new documentary, and we'll get his thoughts on the presidential race. Stay with us.